Joining me today is Jacob Dilks. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob Dilks with Tagged Outdoors. Just here to talk to you today about some DIY things, a lot of compound bow work, anything from building strings, building arrows, tearing a bow down all the way to the riser, cams, peep sights, D-loops, you name it.
I'm really excited for this, man. I know a lot of us are really big fanatics about our bows, especially in the bow hunting community, and I really want to know more about the advanced portion of what to do for my bow for myself, basically to upgrade the performance. Now, I know that there's a lot of beginner stuff too, and we're really going to dive into that. So start out by telling me what made you decide that you were going to start building all your own stuff in your bow.
I was actually sitting at home with my son. He was actually at home sick, and I was just watching some YouTube videos, going through some things, and really wanted to try and figure out how I could do some of this stuff for myself. You know, I just moved with my wife back to the state of Iowa. We don't really have a bow shop that's within an hour drive of me, so wanted to learn how to do my own thing, put my own shop up in my basement, got, draw board, bow press, just got all the tools and essential things that I needed. I got 20 yards down in my basement that I can shoot and tune a bow, and wanted to teach myself everything that I could be able to do my own stuff, do things out in the field when I'm out doing hunts out in public land out west or whatever. So that too, and it gave me the opportunity to learn something new, right? Add a new aspect into the hunting life and really make it so that, when you kill that animal, you know that you did everything you could to make it your own.
Yeah, I'm sure those that comes in extremely handy, especially on those long winter nights or in the spring when we're maybe getting ready for turkey season at best, if you do that kind of bow hunting as well. I know I enjoy it. It's pretty fun, but man, this is going to be great. Yeah, man, I'm really excited to actually learn more about that. I know those long winter nights and kind of transferring into spring, we're getting excited for some turkey hunting, and through the winter and when deer hunting season's not around, we'll be able to do a lot of work to that bow and maybe improve it, help the performance, get yourself a lot more comfortable with what you're shooting. I know you and I talked just briefly a little bit about the arrow build, and I think I want to do that because that may pique a little bit more interest in getting your proper grainage on your arrow and your flight rather than the full-scale aspect of a bow. So let's start there. When you're looking for an arrow, what are you doing to build your first basic arrow that is going to optimize your performance?
The thing I think that is most important to know, too, is everybody's going to be a little bit different, right? Everybody's draw length's different, pull poundage is different. So everybody's going to have a different spined arrow. For me, for example, I have a 31-inch draw. I'm shooting 82 pounds. So I wanted to try and find the absolute lightest arrow in the correct spine that I could, right, so that I can try and put as much weight up front as I humanly possibly can. The big thing that I found out, I was in shooting a lot of stock arrows and stuff like that. I was shooting the FMJs for a long time, great arrow, but I found that I was only having about a 7% FOC, right? So I was thinking that I was shooting this big, giant, heavy arrow, but in reality, by the time it traveled and got to whatever I was aiming at, I was losing a lot of my kinetic energy.
Touch on that a little bit too. FOC, what does that stand for, and what are you gaining in that with your arrow?
So FOC is front of center, and that's really what's helping carry that kinetic energy downrange towards the animal. Basically, the higher the FOC you can get, the more the front end of the arrow is more or less pulling the back end of the arrow and helping the back end of the arrow do a little bit more steering, or helping with the steering of the back end of the arrow.
So in a simplistic term, higher FOC is going to give you a more kinetic energy impact to your target.
Yeah, it's going to definitely help with the kinetic energy side. Now, I'm not saying go out and build an arrow that's got a 30% FOC on it, right? But what I would say is I try to be somewhere in that 14 to 20% range. I feel like that's somewhere that's a good range for somebody that's wanting to do whitetail, elk, mule deer, for somebody to be in when they're doing their arrow builds. And like I said, I start with a lighter arrow. I think mine are 8.9 grains per inch right now, but I got 250 grains up front. A lot more people have started coming out with these big giant inserts that you can cut down from 250 or 300 grains down to like 150, and it gives you a lot of customization and gives you the opportunity to build your own arrows to exactly how you want, whether it be fletchings. Like normally when I'm building an arrow, I might pick 3 different fletching options that I want. And the reason I do that is because, think of it as a rifle, right? Your bow might like something a little bit differently as to what fletching that you're trying to use. You might use a 4-fletch with a tack vane 2.25. You might use a 3-fletch blazer vane, or you might go all the way out to a 3-inch vane. And, that just might be what your bow likes best. That might be what groups best for you. I think that's the biggest thing with the bow, with the arrow build stuff, is really getting getting that high FOC, really maximizing the kinetic energy out of your bow, and just it helps you be so much more accurate, right? That's what we want to be. We want to be accurate with our shot. And by getting those arrow builds to where we want them, knock tuning, all that stuff, well, the ultimate goal is to be more accurate and try and harvest that animal or hit that target or hit that X, that we're trying to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, keep your consistency at the end of the day, hitting your target, harvesting that animal, finding out what works best for you. That's definitely the most important thing. I think a big thing that was cool that you mentioned as well is when you got into this, it was because your kid was sick, and that sucked. But at the same point, here you are, you're in your basement or you're hanging out and you're just watching YouTube videos. You're getting nuts into it. How much knowledge of the DIY bow and arrow aspect did you have leading into these YouTube videos? Like, was that basically your entire training?
I would say that was probably, honestly, about 90% of it. Going into, that was February of this year, I think, around the time when he was sick. It was the Lancaster Archery Challenge was going on. But I was just sitting there watching YouTube videos, and I was like, hey, I think this is something that I can do. I can put a new aspect on there. I can really make sure that I'm in charge of my bow, if you would.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You're just trying to really command every aspect of your bow from your arrow flight to, like you said, you're making sure your draw length's right. You're making sure that you find what fletchings work best for you and your arrow, given your SOC, or your FOC, I'm sorry. And I think that's really cool, and I think that's something that a lot of people will maybe decide to really do, especially in those winter months. I know that's a good time for archery leagues as well. So when you were working on these builds, I know not everybody has the luxury that you do and can shoot in their basement because they're, maybe their parents, maybe their wife, maybe whoever they're living with probably wouldn't like seeing an arrow go in the drywall if something doesn't work out. But I think archery leagues are a big time. So have you ever been in those and tried the new arrows and the new stuff that you were doing during those leagues as well?
Yeah, so to start, fortunately, my basement's concrete walls, so if I hit one of those, the arrow just blows up. I have a wall of shame with one of my deer heads that I got over there on the wall. But to going out, and we did a few different 3D shoots and stuff this year, with our bow setups and bow builds and arrow builds, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing a lot of the 3D stuff. The bow building thing for me was, like I said, it added that new aspect to whether I was target shooting or whether I was hunting, where I could put all of that preparation into harvesting that animal or hitting that X, right? It added a whole new aspect of I did everything that I could to prepare myself for this moment, basically. And that was something that was really intriguing to me. Then going out into the 3D world, that was my first time doing that this year. It was something I wanted to get out and do, and something that was new. And, another big reason I wanted to do that was for my son, to try and give him something to go out and, watch, hopefully grow into and like. And, but it's a lot of fun going out there and hitting some targets and enjoying a Saturday or a Sunday morning and twiddling around with your bow and playing with some stuff.
Oh, absolutely, man. That's awesome. We've touched a little bit on the arrows. Let's go back into that. And I know that balance is a huge thing for everybody too. So when you're trying to balance each of these arrows individually, what's the process that you're going through to get that done?
So just to kind of go through the entire process. So basically what I do is, like I said, I find, we already talked about finding your arrow spine and a little bit, based off of your draw length and your draw weight and all that kind of stuff. After that, then I start to look for whatever components I want. I shoot the Ethics outserts at a 200 grain currently right now, 150 grain right now. And then I'm running the Ethics field points up front. I've got the TAC 2.25 vanes in the back, and a 4-fletch with a boning arrow wrap. And, and I even went as far as to pick my own nocks, right? I'm shooting the AAE IP nocks. So once I kind of got all those components and everything figured out, at that point you want to sit down and really think. Like, I try to get my grain variance from arrow to arrow when I'm building a half a dozen or a dozen. I really want that to be between 3 and 4 grains. So basically what that means, the gap between my lightest and heaviest arrow to only be between 3 to 4 grains. That's achievable and can be done, but also can be hard at the same time. But, so I sit down and I weigh out all my arrows. I get everything cut to the length that I want. Then I'll even go as far and I'll weigh all the components that I bought. I'll weigh all the vanes that I bought, and I'll break those all down into categories. We'll have a light, an average, and have a heavy, or a medium, if you would.
What type of scale are you using to weigh all of these components?
So there's a lot of different scales that you can go out and buy. So as far as the grain scale, to find out, weigh out everything, you're looking for it. I like to use the October Mountain Products grain scale. That one works well. Last Chance Archery makes a great scale. Really just something that you can set all your components and stuff on. It's nice when you can find one that's got a tray or an arrow holder that you can lay the arrow in so it's not rolling off. It's kind of a pain.
You're weighing each individual aspect of that arrow prior to even putting it together.
Yeah, because we're trying to achieve that 3 to 4 grain variance, right? And again, think about it this way. The slightest difference in a cut on an arrow can really throw that grain variance off, right? So we want to be precise with our cutting. We want to square up the ends. We want to make sure we weigh out all the components, to try and bring that variance down to as small as possible. I just helped build Cody's arrows and stuff, not that long ago. Fortunately for him, we were able to get all 6 arrows with a half a grain, right? That's some really tight tolerances on his half a dozen arrows now.
Yeah, so we know when he misses, it's not the arrow's fault.
Yeah, right. No, but the biggest thing for that is if you have a 5 grain difference at 5, 6, 7, 8 grain difference at 100 yards, 80, 90 yards, whatever you're doing, if you're out west and you're trying to shoot a mule deer at 70 or 80 yards, that grain difference can mean a big difference in drop. So if shooting these same 3 arrows at home all the time, that's the big thing. Everybody always breaks up their arrows. I got 3 that I shoot, I got 3 that I hunt with. Well, what if those 3 that you hunt with are 8 or 9 grains lighter than the 3 that you target practice with?
Right. You want to be able to reach into your quiver and know whatever arrow you grab, even if it's in a sporadic moment, because that animal's coming in on a string, and you want to be able to throw that right up on your rest and know 100% you're going to be confident no matter what you grab, it's going to get the job done.
Absolutely, and that's the biggest thing for me. I'm a really big believer in making sure you shoot all of your arrows after a build at least once, right? You should go through and shoot your half a dozen, your dozen. 9 times out of 10, there's at least one wonky arrow in a dozen. You don't always find one in a half a dozen, but you never know that if you don't do that, you put that arrow in your quiver, you grab that one when you're going out for a hunt, and that ends up being your wonky arrow. Oops, you're preparing for that moment, and you're putting the time in, saving the money, doing all the things that you need to do to be able to make that trip. Why not take that extra step in making sure that we have tight grain variances on our arrows and making sure that we're doing all the preparation and the work to make sure we get the most out of that dozen?
Oh, absolutely. And I think something else that plays a big factor in that, and you briefly touched on it, but I want to definitely go more in depth about it, is the knock tuning. I know a lot of guys understand that you need to have your fletching set right, you need to have your weights there, your grain variance like you're talking about needs to be tight, but I'm actually really unfamiliar with the whole knock tuning aspect, so give me some more on that.
Yeah, so knock tuning, and this goes into, are we trying to tune the bow or are we trying to tune the arrow? That's the biggest question right now in the outdoor industry, because everybody has a different answer. Everybody thinks that we're trying to tune the bow to the arrow, or so I should say everyone. Some do. Some think that we're trying to tune the arrow to the bow. So it's just one of those arguments. It's like the great broadhead debate. Which one's the sharpest? Which one's going to get the job done?
Your fixed versus mechanical.
Right. I'm a believer in both. I think you need to have a nice tuned arrow and a nice tuned bow. So knock tuning, right, we're working on the arrow at that point. Each arrow has a weak side spine and they have a heavier side spine, right? So depending on how the carbon was weaved or rolled, those weak spots could be in different areas. So if you go to put your arrow into the bow and you shoot this weak side at a straight 90 degree right, then all of a sudden your next arrow's at a dead 90 degree left, and then your next arrow's at a 165 degree turn. You know what I mean? It's those weak sides of the arrow you want them to be in the same spot. So basically what knock tuning is so you're going to take each one of your arrows and you're going to shoot them through paper. And so we're going to sit there and we're going to turn the nocks, and this is a very meticulous process. But we're going to sit there and we're going to shoot each arrow, and we're going to sit there and turn the nock little by little until we get to the point where we found that perfect spine alignment. Right? This is for all the people out there that don't have RAM testers. Those are where you set your arrow on there and it's got a nice weight on there, and you can roll the arrow and it shows, those are $300. The other thing you can do too is you can float it in a bathtub. Not a lot of people like to do that. Basically, so you can knock tune it, right? And you can shoot it through paper and you can find that perfect spine alignment, and you can get each one of your arrows to have that weak side of the spine facing the same direction every time.
I got you. Yeah, right on. And it makes a lot of sense, too. That's your first point of contact with your bow, realistically. So having that knock alignment and having that knock tune to that arrow to get that arrow tuned to your bow, it just makes a lot of sense.
It is, and that's why we have that conversation of tuning the bow or tuning the arrow, because the bow drives the arrow, but the arrow is the finished product, right? That's our projectile that's going downrange. That's something that comes into it as well. Like, a lot of people like cut the front of their arrow off all the time. What part of your arrow do you think you want to be the straightest? It's probably the back, right? That's taking all the force from the string. That's what we want to realistically be straight. I'm a big believer on let's cut some off the front, some off the back. A lot of guys will go out there and can get your arrow spinner, and you can spin your arrows and see which side's more wobbly. That's what a lot of guys do, and cut off the more wobbly end. And that's really a good starting point. But like I said, if you can cut off a certain point on the front, and then you can cut off what the additional of what you needed off the back, now you really just made that arrow as straight as you possibly could.
And when you're getting these arrows, you're getting like a bare shaft arrow. So you're cutting it, you're not really worried about where your fletchings are, because you're going to put the fletchings on after this process is done.
Yeah, so once I get everything built, we get everything cut, we get all the stuff glued in, inserts, veins and everything go on, wraps and all that stuff. Like I said, then we go into the knock tuning. You can start there if you want to, get your knock tune, get all the spine alignment and stuff figured out. There's a few different methods. You can buy a ram spine tester, you can float them in a bathtub, you can, even knock tune, or move on to paper tuning. I do a lot of paper tuning. I do a lot of bare shaft tuning, and this is where we start to get into more of the, hey, now we're trying to tune the bow side. We're not trying to necessarily tune the arrow at this point. We're trying to make sure that we just took the bow apart and we took all the strings off. We took the strings off, we cleaned the cams, we went through and we gave it a good cleaning at the end of the season. So now we're going to throw the strings back on. We're going to throw it in the case, put some wax on it. We'll come back to it in January or February, right before we start to worry about target time or 3D time. Now we're going to go into the paper tuning aspect, where we're going to take it, we're going to shoot it through paper. We're going to look for, if it's got a left knock tear or right knock tear, high, low. So basically, if you have a left knock tear, you're going to move your rest to the right, and this is going to be really small increments. We're talking 32nd to a 16th of an increment at a time. Once you get the left corrected, you're going to be left with a high knock tear. So the high knock tear, as long as we have everything in timed and everything's tuned with the bow cams and everything's in sync, then we'll start either our rest up and down, or we can move our knocking point on the string. I like to try and get the knocking point set and really try to tune everything from with the vertical with the rest, because once you get it tied in and set, you really don't want to have to go back, cut it off, and restart over. That's something that takes a little bit of time away. But if we have a high knock tear with our bow, right, we need to either move our knocking point down or we need to move our rest up.
I got you. Yeah. Okay. That definitely makes sense. I think that's definitely getting into a little bit more of the advanced portion as well, which nothing wrong with that. And I'm definitely curious to see how that goes. It's something that I'm going to do a little bit more of myself. And we're really getting in with the arrows. I feel like we've got a great understanding of where we're going to be coming in with that. Now, you mentioned getting into the bow tuning. We're saying arrow tuning versus bow tuning, which one you're really getting after. So when you're getting a bow, you're getting a bow absolutely naked. It'll probably have the strings on it that they come with stock. But let's say you just bought a brand new bow. It's fully naked. There's no sight. There's no rust. The strings that it came with are on it. If that's your process and that's what you've gotten, what's your next step? Like, you just bought that bow fresh from the store.
So if I just bought it fresh from the store, I just ordered it right from maybe Lancaster or straight from a dealer. Maybe you went down the road and you picked it up from a local shop. You like to buy local, but you want to take it home and work on it yourself. Once I get the bow, I like to go through and just check everything over right from the factory. I like to go through and try and tighten any nuts, screws, any little set screws and stuff that I can find. Just make sure everything's good from that standpoint. Next, what I'll go through and do is we'll get our poundage set. We'll get our draw length set. Once we find those two positions and we're happy and we're comfortable with those, I might check the tiller on the bow. And for those of you that don't know what the tiller is, that's the distance between your limb pocket and string. Then after I get that, make sure that measurement's good, make sure nothing's off there. And basically that tiller measurement too, that's making sure that your limb screw bolts are at the same depth. Right, so if one's a little bit farther in than the other, or you're a guy that likes to bottom them out, and you got one that's bottom out, one of them's a complete turn out. Now those limbs are not flexing at the same strength, basically. So that's going to throw your tiller measurement off.
Yeah, you're wanting to have an equal pressure between your limbs 100% right when you're drawing back, because that's going to change your arrow flight a lot, and then everything you've done in the tuning aspect probably was useless.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just one of those little steps that you want to make sure that you get that taken care of, because that can throw everything off. Once I get that part done, I make sure all those measurements are good. Again, I got the poundage set to where I want it. I've got the draw length set where I want it. Then we're going to go over, we're going to put a D-loop on because we want to make sure we can start firing some arrows through there. So we're going to try and get our D-loop tied on, right? Get our arrow at a 90. Get that set. We're going to get our D-loop tied on. Once we got that tied on, we're not going to completely cinch that down right away. We're going to get it so that we got our knots almost finished, but we're not going to completely cinch it down. So once we get to that point, I'm going to move up to the peep sight. We're going to get the peep sight, slid in, tied in. If we need to put a rotation in the string, one rotation equals about a 90-degree turn on a peep sight, counterclockwise with your string when you're turning it.
And turning your string, you're getting at like twisting it a little bit?
Yeah, so twisting your string. So yeah, when you have your peep sight, people always have peep sight rotation problems all the time. So if it's at a 90-degree angle from where it needs to be, you would want to give one full twist to the string in a clockwise motion on the bottom cam to take that 90-degree
And you're
turn.
doing that while it's on a bow press.
Yeah, so you'll need some sort of a bow press, and that's, everybody thinks that you need some big, nice, fancy bow press. You don't necessarily need that. Lancaster Archery sells pocket square or pocket presses, basically is what they are. They're really small. They fit right in your pocket. They fit right in your pack. And, you can have those at home. They're relatively cheap. I think they're like $50 to be able to put on, do a twist in your string or tie in a peep, or, you can even take strings and cables off if you need to. Make sure you know what you're doing, and try to be pretty quick, because they're not probably something that you want to have a bow pressed for a long time with. But
I definitely wish I had one of those and I even knew about this years ago, because, dude, my peep sight was such a pain in the ass. Every time I drew back, I'd have to, like, reach down while I was drawing and turn it with my cheek just a little bit so I could get a view, a good visual out of it to line it up with my sight. So that's a huge, huge part of it as well. And are you comfortable with the stock strings that come with a bow when you buy it brand new, or are you going to put on some special type of string yourself?
So as far as the stock strings go, a lot of these bow companies anymore, they make some really good stock strings. They're going to get you through multiple seasons as long as you take care of them, as long as you're waxing them, taking care of them, and you're not abusing them and all that kind of stuff. They will work for you. Me personally, I like to try and get, a lot of these companies that specifically build strings, that's their job. They make a really quality string and a quality product. It's not going to have a lot of stretch, because that's the biggest thing. When, after the first 200 arrows out of your new bow, those strings settle. And once those strings settle, peeps turn, all of a sudden you have a half an inch on your draw length that you didn't have before. Anchor points change. So you really want to make sure that you try to find a string company, if you're going to use aftermarket strings, that they don't have a lot of string stretch. They don't have a lot of twist, and there's some really good companies out there that make some quality products. I prefer gas bow strings. I just bought 2 new strings from them this year and slapped them on both my 3D rig and my hunting rig. But yeah, those aftermarket strings are really nice, but what comes on the bow is really nice too.
I gotcha. And you mentioned having to wax your strings after you're shooting. So are you going based off of what kind of day and what kind of environment you're in, determine when you're going to wax your strings, or is it more of like the amount of shots that you're putting through it? Like, when are you really putting on wax on your bow, and how much are you doing it? Also, what areas are you waxing? I know you and I kind of talked about a guy that was like waxing his cams and stuff. We don't think that that's something that you should do, but give me a little bit more in depth as to exactly how you're going to get that wax put on and keep those strings healthy for the life of this bow.
So I would say wax your bowstring as needed, right? We don't need to sit down and wax our bowstring every single time we shoot a bow. What we need to do, if you see some fraying, you start to see some of those fibers starting to pull out of the string a little bit, it looks like it's getting dry, that's when we need to throw some wax on it. For a guy like me in Iowa, where I get outside and I shoot, and I shoot quite often, I really can get away most of the time with waxing maybe 3-4 times a year. Once at the beginning of 3D season, once at the end, and once probably mid preparation for hunting season, and then maybe when I put the bow away for the year. But that's a different aspect, right? If you're out west, you just came from out west, we just talked about that too. Your string was drier than dry.
Oh yeah, I'm running around for 8-10 hours a day in 102-degree heat. and I'd get back to the truck and I'd look at my strings and I'm like, oh my God, I'm scared to shoot this thing.
Well, that's what we want to pay attention to, right? At that moment, we want to make sure we're putting some wax on there and that we're taking care of our string, because, if we do get it to the point that it's too dry and it does start to make you a little bit nervous. As far as the cam stuff go, really making sure, I like to stop at the servings, right? So you got 2 servings on each one of your cables and you got a serving on your string. Those are what protect the string from the cams, right? So that they don't cut the fibers or anything like that. So where those are, as you draw, those cables are going to roll into the cam. That string's going to roll through the cam as you're drawing. Any wax that you put on those servings might get in that cam and potentially cause a serious accident or something like that. So I like to wax everything in between the servings. As long as you stay in between the servings, when you're waxing your bowstrings, you should be doing pretty well.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's definitely helpful information to know about when to wax and definitely how to wax it. It seems like a simple premise, but I know that if you go a little overboard, it can actually do more harm than good. Something else we were mentioning, you were getting on with the D-loop and, really setting your peep sight. There's a lot of controversy in it, and I want to see where you stand on it about maybe using a kisser button versus a nose button or anything in that regard on your strings to improve your accuracy. Which one are you shooting, and which one do you think is best?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing in archery that everybody needs to understand is it's about comfort. If you're not comfortable with what you're using or comfortable with the process, or you're having a hard time repeating that same motion through your shot, that's going to make it's not going to make it fun for you.
Right. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is having that consistent, repetitive motion to make sure that you're optimizing your accuracy.
Yeah, so, and as far as like the nose button and the kisser button scenario, again, it just comes down to comfort. Like, you prefer to have a kisser button. I do not prefer to have a kisser button. I've liked using the Bowmar nose button. I think that that's something that was a great product. It was a simplistic idea, but it turned out to be something that was a really good product. And, it gave everybody, and, you can use it in combination with a kisser button if you wanted to give you that additional anchor point. But for somebody that's first starting out, that's really trying to find their anchor point, I think a kisser button is a really good place to start. And for you, that's probably what you started with. And now you've just hunted with it for so long that it's just something that you're needing, you're accustomed to now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge comfort thing for me. I have had a kisser button my entire life. It's definitely something that I like to have. And going back to what you just said, it's definitely a comfort thing. I've tried shooting without it, and I feel like I can maintain accuracy, but I like to have that kisser button because for me, it gives me that consistent anchor point, and I feel like I can get that repetitive motion and that muscle memory built up on the most consistent basis for me. For me and the Bowmar nose button on my 3D rig, I'm trying to really fine tune my anchor point when I'm trying to shoot an X, right? Or I'm trying to hit a 12 ring, or I'm trying to shoot that arrow really far down range at a tack event. I really want to make sure that my anchor point is in the same spot every time. So that nose button allows me to bring it down to just the smallest little point on the very tip of that nose button. Now, for hunting, for me particularly, I don't use a kisser button or a nose button. And that's just something that was comfortable for me this year with the bow that I was shooting. Last year I did use a nose button. This year I didn't tie it on, started shooting the bow, realized, oh, hey, I kind of like this one without it. But again, it came back to that comfort thing. So doing what's comfortable for you and helps you be more repetitive in your motion and your shot process will overall help you be more successful. Yeah, absolutely, man. Another thing I want to touch on too is you mentioned the paper tuning. Give me a little bit more in depth as to how you're going to go about that process and when you think you should do it. Because I know a handful of guys that say, well, I'm not going to be shooting long ranges. Like, I'm not shooting way down range, 50, 60, 70 plus yards. So I don't need to paper tune because I'm only shooting 20, 30 yards. Give me your thoughts on that.
Paper tuning is really a starting point, right? Most people, most shops paper tune with a fletched arrow at 6 feet. They get it to where it's shooting a perfect hole, right? And we get the nice little hole in the center with the fletchings on the outside. They send you on your way. They send you home. That's a really good starting spot. But most people don't know when you get home, you should probably go shoot a bear shaft. Because if you go shoot a bear shaft after you just got that fletched arrow done at 6 feet, there's a good chance, unless they got it perfect on the first try, that you're still going to see some sort of a right paper tear or a left paper tear or high tear. so be it, whatever. I like to paper tune with the fletched. Then I like to switch to the bear shaft. You can stay at that 6 foot mark if that's what you're comfortable with. I even like to start at 6 feet and work my way back to about 15 feet, because then we're really super tuning and fine tuning that bear shaft paper chair, because the farther you are back from the target, the more variation that arrow potentially has during flight.
Yeah, you're getting more rotations as it's flying.
Absolutely. So it's, if your string travel is not perfectly behind that knock as it's going down the center of the bow, right, it's going to throw that arrow maybe left, maybe right, so that's going to be more dramatic at that 15-foot mark.
You mentioned going back. You're not wanting to shoot your bear shaft arrow at 20, 30, 40 yards just because, like we're saying, it's getting a big variance the further back you go. At what rate do you think, or what distance do you think it becomes too far to shoot a bear shafted arrow?
I would say that, you really don't need to go much past 15 feet, honestly. That's really about the farthest you probably need to go. If you get it to the point that at 15 feet, once you get that worked out, you're going to really see some 30-second adjustments, or it's going to be a 16th of an adjustment. It's some really fine-tuned adjustments. That's why, a lot of these rests and stuff, Hamsky, QAD, their newer style rests have micro adjustment to help you be able to make those small incremental adjustments to help you with tuning your bow and tuning your rest and getting everything going. So once I get the paper tune done, then I get the bear shaft tune done. Once you get bullet holes with those, now we're rocking, right? We're cooking with peanut oil, the bows. We're getting it to where we want it to be. Then we can move on to we can move back to French tuning, also known as walk back tuning, and then really kind of my fourth step is you should try and broadhead tune. And this is something I was really bad at for a long time, where I would pick the arrows up, says on the package, hey, flies like a field point, walk out into the timber and just go with it. And for a lot of guys, you get by with it. It probably works. If you're going out west, you're going on a dream muley hunt, I don't think that you probably want to live with, it's good enough. You want to make sure that your broadheads are flying like your field points, right? So really broadhead tuning is kind of that last step in my tuning process.
And with the broadhead tuning, for me, I know that I have always shot Muzzy. I've shot Muzzy MX3 fixed blades, the 3-blade. That's all I've ever shot. I've tried to alter from it a little bit, but I just can't. I think it goes back to the comfort. It might be a mental standpoint thing. Those are my favorite broadheads by far. With that being said, when I'm going through this whole arrow tuning process and my bow tuning process and finding or getting to that broadhead aspect of it, do you think that I should get multiple broadheads set aside and see which one flies best with that, or do you think it's just going to become a grain aspect?
Yeah, so see, this is where, for me, that argument of arrow tuning and bow tuning all comes together, right? Because your broadhead is the very last point on your setup. When you're tuning your bow, that's the very last part that I tune. I broadhead tune like we just talked about. But at the same time, we're really arrow tuning again, too. Broadhead companies have variances, too. So you might have a broadhead that weighs exactly 100 grains. You might have a broadhead that weighs 96. You might have a broadhead that weighs 104.
Right. So even out of the package, you should still be scaling these.
Yeah, you should scale them. You don't want to just set a whole group of them aside. We want to go through. We want to weigh these. We want to match them up with our arrows. And this is some really,
it becomes really finessed.
Really finessed, going down the rabbit hole of arrow building, if you would. But at the end of the day, though, if you can get that entire setup again to within half of a grain, you should never not be confident in your arrow flight. If you do all the right things to prepare for that hunt that you've been waiting for your entire life, why not go through these steps to make sure you set yourself up for success?
Yeah, and it may be a tedious process, and you're going to have a lot of time and hours into it. Like you said, you found a lot of enjoyment in it, but even with that, you're now getting to a point where 100% confidence that everything is set exactly how it needs to be, and there should be no alteration in your shot. And the only error that's going to come from it is maybe yourself pulling your head off it or torquing your bow or anything, something like that.
Yeah, that's all. Control what you can control. That's all form stuff. That's stuff that we can work on, right? That's what this DIY thing for me was. Hey, this is a whole nother aspect that I can control and that I can work through in my process. Having the ability to work on your bow or tie in a peep or tie in a D-loop or serve a center serving, being able to do all those are just good little tools that you can use when you go on these hunts, right? For example, you just got back from muley hunting. Your kisser button ripped off.
Yeah, that was a shame. I had to throw a different one right on there right away, and it seems like the anchor point in it has changed. So that's something that I'm definitely going to have to go through and adjust when I get back home.
Yeah, and that's something that's really small, right? The kisser button's a really small part, but it affects, like you said, it affects our anchor point, all of that stuff. That's why I like bringing that kit with me, right? I've got my miniature bow press in there. I've got my, my center serving. I've got my 3D serving to do my peep and tie everything in. I've got all of those tools and equipment that I need with me, that if a peep sight pops out, a kisser button falls off, a nick happens in the string, like I brought strings with me.
Right. Well, that way your hunt's not over. You don't feel like you just got to go home, or you don't need to find an archery shop and buy a whole new setup just because of it.
Yeah, because how far did you travel to that archery shop?
When I went to get a kisser button, it was like an hour and a half in each direction.
Yeah, so that just cost you 3 hours of hunting, when we could have done that in camp in probably 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah, that was definitely a frustrating aspect.
That's where it adds to that side of it too, where it'll make those western hunts or those hunts out of the state or country or whatever, when you have those tools with you and you know how to use them, you can fix it on the fly, move on. If I go through, we're traveling in the backcountry and I nick my string, immediately you're like, oh my hunt's over. Elite Archery was really good for a long time. They'll ship you a bow in 24 hours. Let's be honest, in my opinion, I love that they say that they'll do that. I highly doubt it's going to get to me in 24 hours. I would love to think that it is.
Yeah, it'll get to you quick, but it's hard to always keep that timestamp.
Yeah, we're on a budget, right? We're on a time frame normally when we go on these hunts. We got families or whatever we might want to get back to.
Taking off work or kids at home, any of that.
Yeah, so like basically when I bought those aftermarket strings, right, I kept the stock ones that came on the bow. I've got those in the pack, and I bring them with me. I get a nick out west, and I can take that bow press out of that pocket press out. I can press my limbs real quick, swap strings and cables or whatever, and then I can go through the process real quick, tie in a peep sight, tie on a D loop. We can get it shot and get it sighted all back in, and I can do that in 4 or 5 hours instead of waiting for 24 hours for a bow to come in the mail.
Right on. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to have. So definitely getting that gear, getting that understanding, essentially helping yourself. Another thing I want to touch on too is figuring out your draw weight. So I know you and I are different in physique as well, which may make a little bit of a different effort towards it. But you see a lot of stuff come out where everybody believes you need to have this super high poundage to your bow. You mentioned earlier you're shooting 82 pounds. Well, I'm shooting 69. Obviously, the number is a little bit fun for me as well, but it is a comfort thing. I want to be able to have it for, if it's colder weather and making sure that I get that draw. What are you doing to determine your draw weight?
So determining my draw weight for me in this scenario, like with my hunting setup, right? I built really heavy arrows. My bow is not known to be a speed demon, when it comes out of the box as far as IBO stuff goes. So I'm blessed with a 31-inch draw. Unfortunately, I'm not a short draw guy. Sorry for those that are out there. That's when you have to use the higher poundage, right? You have to crank up the poundage to try to make up for the draw length that you don't have, to try and get the most out of those cams. Basically, think of it this way, right? You want to be comfortable. If you have a kid that's out there and you're trying to teach them how to shoot and you want them to have fun, do you want them to be sore the next day? Probably not.
Depends how much he likes the kid.
Right? But so, that's where you want that to be comfortable for them. Or, maybe you're teaching your wife or your spouse or whatever, hey, you want to shoot with me and stuff like that. You're setting the bow up for her. You don't want it to be miserable. You want her to have a good time. Now as for the guys that have been hunting and stuff for a really, really long time, pull what you can control. We don't want to be drawing standing on the ground and we realize, oh, I can pull 83 pounds.
Yeah, and then you're sitting in a stand on a cold December morning, you get a great big buck finally in front of you, you've been hunting all year, and your only draw is while you're still sitting at like an awkward angle and you can't pull it back.
Absolutely, right? That would be a really unfortunate scenario. Then we got to try and stand up, and we might scare the buck or whatever off that we're trying to hunt. So yeah, I think it's the biggest part is on the draw weight thing is pull what you can control and that you can be comfortable with. Now, a lot of guys like to crank up the weight because they want the speed out of the arrow. I think there's a really fine line between kinetic energy and speed. That was for me, like with this arrow build in my bow setup, I was shooting a 552 grain arrow at 31 inches at like 72 pounds. I was only shooting about 260 feet per second, which is way fast enough to kill a whitetail. Now, in the state of Iowa, and where I hunt and stuff like that, I want that arrow speed to be just a little bit faster for me. So I wanted to go with a heavier limb, and I did a couple of twists in the cables and pushed them past their limits a little bit, but not recommending that, but can be done. But got it to where I could get it up to 82 pounds. That was something that I was safe and comfortable with drawing. I can draw it standing, I can draw it sitting, I can draw it kneeling, and that helped me bring my arrow speed back up to around that 280 feet per second range. I feel like that's a really good range to be in for a whitetail, especially with a heavier arrow. That was my goal, was to find that perfect kinetic energy and speed.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you mentioned that. You're basing the speed of your bow on more so the game that you're hunting.
Yeah, I mean, for a whitetail, we know they're quick, right? They've got some really good senses. They can smell, they can see, just like a lot of the other game and stuff that we hunt too. An elk, for example, you probably want to practice pulling and getting as much weight as you possibly can behind the arrow, right? They've got a big body, a lot of mass to them that we're
super thick hide as well.
Yeah, super thick hide, but if we're going out and we might be hunting, maybe like an antelope or something like that, right? They're really quick. We want to make sure we have as much speed as possible. They're not the biggest animal in the world. We're probably going to get enough kinetic energy, at a 310 feet per second with a 400 grain arrow. We're going to get enough kinetic energy to go through them, but we need to have enough speed to get to them at 70, 80 yards.
Yeah, and hope that they don't jump the string on you.
Absolutely.
So that makes a lot of sense too. You're factoring the speed of your bow kind of based off of the game that you're hunting, but at the same time, you're getting that universal range. You're saying that really anywhere from that 280 to that 300 is going to give you the most universal feet per second for hunting any type of game.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part too when buying a bow. A lot of guys buy a bow and they see this IBO speed on there and it might say 345 feet per second or 335 or whatever it is. Let's be realistic. That is at the max draw length. That is with a 350 grain arrow.
So that's your standards, like 350 grains?
Like, I don't know a lot of people that shoot a 350 grain arrow, right? That is a really, 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 really light arrow, but that's what they test all of their bows at. It's probably in the 90% let off range, and that's what they test it at. So they get that 350 feet per second. Now, I'm a dealer. I sell or whatever, say I'm a dealer is what I'm saying. So, I'm setting this guy up with this bow and he really wants it because it shoots 350 feet per second, but he's got a 27 inch or 28 inch draw length. I'll use my buddy Zach back home, for example. He's got a 27 and a half inch draw length. He's not a big dude. That bow's set up to be 345 feet per second. But what I'm getting at is with his draw length at 27 and a half and the max potential of that cam rotation is at 31, he's only getting 75% rotation out of the cam. Like, he's never going to get the max potential from the cam when he's only at a 27 and a half inch draw.
Yeah, he's not going to get that 345 feet per second off that IBO. He's more probably going to be getting around that like 300 to 310.
Exactly. So then that next step for him, and I know what his opinions are. He's really big. He likes to follow the ranch fairy. He's all big about the heavier the arrow, the better. That's and that's his views. But for somebody like him, you might want to find a really light arrow. Right? And make sure if you can crank your 70-pound boat up to 75, maybe we do that. Or maybe we purchase some aftermarket limbs that are 75 or 80-pound limbs if we can handle it, so that we can help kind of get that speed built up a little bit for whatever you're trying to hunt. Or, in Zach's case, like, he's okay with it. He's happy with the speed that he has. He's shooting he's shooting 265 or whatever, or 260 or something like that with a really heavy arrow, and he's comfortable with that. He thinks that's good enough for him. So, it really comes all down to personal preference and opinion and what you think is best. But again, it all comes back to controlling what you can control.
Yeah, you want to control everything within your power. But at that same point, it's going to take a lot of experiment. Like, you're going to need to experiment a lot to figure out what's going to work best for you and find out where does that comfort and that experimentation come into play, and really find that happy medium of what works best for you to keep that arrow flying as consistent as possible while maintaining a good speed.
For everybody out there that's wanting to become a DIY person too, like, don't be shy. again, I was sitting at home with my son on the couch watching YouTube videos, and I was like, hey, I think I can do that. My knowledge about them and how to work with them and tie D-loops, like a D-loop might have been the furthest extent of my knowledge. I had no idea how to serve. I had no idea how to put in a peep. I've seen bow presses used. That was really the furthest extent of my knowledge. And, I ended up deciding it was something that I wanted to do. Again, I'm an hour away from my closest shop. It's been my shop for the last 10 years. I love them. They're getting ready to move 45 minutes farther south down the road. So now we're talking almost a 2-hour drive. And, it was even with him that I was kind of talking about it. He's like, dude, you could do this. And I was talking to him about it. He's like, why can't you? So me and him kind of went through and decided what I needed. He helped me figure out what I really need. I ended up buying a bow press that he had in the back. I looked up a couple of ways on how to build a draw board, bought a bow scale so I can measure my poundage, bought a bow vise off of eBay that I found that was good enough for me. And, I just set it up so that I had my own little mini shop, and then I started tinkering. That was the most fun part about it, was the tinkering side. Just going down there and having something to work on for an hour or two at a time, relax your mind, and just focus on your bow and just put all the time and the effort into it. Like, that was something that I really, really enjoyed. And it's something that you can learn. Like, you just have, don't be afraid to learn it. You're going to have some mess ups. There's going to be some screw ups. But fortunately for me, I made sure that I worked on all of my own bows first and got those set up before I really wanted to work on anybody else's.
Right.
But, even Cody, he brought his bow down, and we broke that down, and we went through it and just did a couple of little simple things. And the difference that he saw in his accuracy and how the bow felt for him was something that he was really pleased with. So that was, at the end of the day, he was kind of maybe interested at some point in time in learning how to do some of that stuff himself. So be confident, don't be scared. You can all learn something new, and it's something that you can figure out how to put your own little shop in your basement and work on your own stuff.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you about this. I know you and I have actually mentioned it a little bit prior to this podcast, which I feel like it's important to throw out the fact that we're actually doing this in your car. We set this up. I was coming back from western Nebraska, met you guys on the eastern Nebraska side. We did a little bit of whitetail hunting. I got to watch you drop your bow from the top. That really triggered a lot of these conversations into what we would do if something extreme really happened to it. And we figured, dude, this would just be a lot of great intel to give to other guys. And hopefully it wasn't too much for anybody to take in. And like I said, I really do hope that anybody that's listening to this tries it out, really experiments with it, and like you say, get it in your basement, get it in your house, tinker with it a little bit, and find out what really works best for you. It's been a lot of knowledge, and I really do hope that people take a lot from this, because I know in my aspect, I definitely have. Like I said, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this with us, man. It's been huge, but I've got about a 10-hour drive home, so I think we're going to wrap this up. Definitely going to get with you later on in the year. I'd like to bring my bow down, learn some stuff myself. I'm probably going to go home and actually get a few things to tinker with and fine-tune my bow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. If anybody's got anything, reach out to Tagged Outdoors. They'll get a hold of me, and we can try and answer any questions you guys have. So thanks again.